The train came at 7:15 every morning, and the dog never moved. He sat there, on the gravel just inches from the rusted tracks, eyes fixed on the horizon, always in the same spot. Rain, snow, heat, nothing changed him. Some kids dared each other to go near. Adults just muttered and walked faster. But Jamie stopped. He stood across the tracks, backpack hanging off one shoulder, watching. The German shepherd had a thick coat, now dirt-matted and dull. His ribs showed. His ears didn't twitch at the sound of the train horn. Jamie stared. So did the dog. Neither moved. From behind, someone jeered. That things cursed, mumbled. A teen. He's waiting for a ghost or something. Jamie ignored him. He couldn't explain it, but the dog's eyes, they looked like they were holding something in. Something heavy. Something that hurt every morning. Jamie paused at that same spot before school. Just for a minute, the train roared past. The dog never blinked. One morning, Jamie walked across the tracks, slow and cautious. "Hey, boy," he said quietly, staying low. "You okay?" The dog turned his head. His gaze was sharp, not wild. Tired, but aware. Jamie took a step closer. The dog didn't move. "I'm not gonna hurt you," Jamie said. A low growl rumbled from the shepherd's throat. Jamie froze. "It's okay. I just want to know why you're here." A moment passed. Then the dog turned back, toward the tracks. Like Jamie didn't exist. Jamie backed away. He didn't tell anyone, not his mum, not the kids at school. But the next day, he brought a sandwich, peanut butter and jelly. It was all they had. The dog sniffed the air when Jamie tossed it gently on the gravel. But he didn't eat. Jamie shrugged. "Suit yourself." The next day, Jamie brought chicken. Still, the dog didn't eat. But he sniffed longer this time. On the fourth day, the chicken was gone. Jamie didn't see him eat it. But it was gone. A week passed. Then too, Jamie began to talk when he sat. Just a few words at first. "They say you've been here for months." Pause. "I think that's stupid. If someone left you, you should just go. Dogs, move on." The dog flicked an ear. "Guess you don't think so." Sometimes Jamie brought stories. He'd read them out loud from a tattered book. The dog never looked at him, but he never left, either. Then came the day of the stone. A group of older boys passed by. One tossed a rock. It hit the dog's side with a thud. Jamie jumped up. "Stop. He's just a mutt." One boy laughed. "Leave him alone." They walked off, laughing. Jamie rushed over. The dog stood, but didn't growl. He limped a little on his left leg. Jamie knelt his hand out. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "People are awful." For the first time, the dog leaned forward and sniffed his fingers. Then he sat down again. Jamie blinked. Okay, progress. He noticed the collar the next day. Worn leather, rusted buckle. The tag was scratched beyond reading, but it was there. "You had someone," Jamie whispered. "Did they leave you?" The dog didn't flinch. Jamie leaned closer. The scar across the dog's flank was old but deep, like a burn or maybe something worse. "You've been through stuff, huh?" He sat down beside him, not too close, just enough. "Me, too," he said softly. The wind picked up. The tracks vibrated faintly. The train would be there in 3 minutes. Jamie stayed. When the train thundered past, the dog didn't blink. Jamie watched the dog, who watched the tracks. "Who are you waiting for?" Jamie whispered. The next day, Jamie's mum noticed the missing lunch meat. "You giving that to someone?" she asked. He hesitated. "A dog." She raised an eyebrow. "A stray, sort of. Be careful, strays bite." "He won't." He wasn't sure how he knew that. He just did. Later that evening, Jamie walked the tracks again, this time after sunset. The dog was still there. Jamie sat beside him in silence. From down the line, the signal lights blinked red. The faint glow lit up the shepherd's eyes. For a second, Jamie saw something in them. Pain, hope, maybe both. "Who are you?" Jamie murmured. The dog turned his head just slightly and looked at him, not past him, not through him. At him, Jamie swallowed hard. The moment was still, unshakable. Then the dog turned back, toward the tracks. But Jamie saw it. That second of connection, like something locked deep inside, had stirred. From then on, Jamie stopped calling him the dog. In his mind, he had a name. Shadow. See. "You tomorrow, Shadow," Jamie whispered, getting up. He didn't expect a response, but just as he walked away, a soft whine followed him. Jamie turned around. The German shepherd was still staring at the tracks, but his ears were perked, and for the first time, his tail moved, just slightly, like he remembered how Jamie smiled. It was small, but it meant everything. He walked home in the dark, heart pounding. He didn't know the full story yet, but he was going to find it. Jamie didn't tell anyone he was going back. He just grabbed leftovers from the fridge, a piece of cold chicken wrapped in foil, and slipped out before the sky turned blue. His feet knew the way. Shadow was already there, sitting, same as before. Jamie stood quietly across the tracks. The dog didn't move, didn't even turn his head. "I brought something," Jamie said. His voice was soft, like he didn't want to scare anything away. He stepped forward and unwrapped the chicken. He set it gently on the gravel, a few feet from the dog, then backed away. Shadow didn't react at first, but then his nose twitched. He turned slightly, sniffed, and leaned forward. Jamie held his breath. The dog took the chicken and laid back down, chewing slow, like he wasn't in a hurry, like he was thinking. Jamie gave a small smile and sat down again, not too close, just enough. "See," he whispered, "not poison, just dinner." The wind blew through the grass along the tracks. Shadow licked his. Pause. Jamie pulled a sandwich from his own bag and took a bite, chewing while watching the dog. "You're not like other dogs," he said, his voice barely above the breeze. "You don't bark, you don't wag, you don't run." He paused, swallowing hard. "But you wait, that's the one thing you do." Shadow didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked forward. Jamie looked down at his shoes. "I used to wait too." For someone, the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was quiet, but not empty. Jamie reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled napkin. "I wrote something," he said. "You want to hear it?" He cleared his throat and read slowly. "Some dogs bark to be heard. Others wait to be seen. But the quiet ones, those are the ones who remember what they lost." He looked at the dog. "That's you, isn't it?" Shadow's tail didn't move, but his ears shifted slightly. Jamie leaned back, resting on his elbows. "They call you crazy, the kids. They say you're broken, that you're just waiting for a ghost." He looked at him. "I don't think you're crazy. I think you remember." The dog lifted his head just enough to blink once at Jamie, then looked back at the tracks. Jamie took a slow breath. "My dad used to sit like that, right on our porch, looking out like something was going to show up and fix everything. I didn't get it back then. He paused. But maybe I do now. Shadow lay still, the only movement coming from his chest as he breathed in and out. The sound of a distant horn made Jamie glance down the track. "You hear that?" he asked. Shadow's ears perked and his whole body stiffened. Jamie whispered, "That's why you're here." The train whistle came louder now, echoing off the hills. Jamie stood, brushing gravel off his pants. He didn't say anything, just stood beside the dog as the ground began to tremble. The train burst through the curve, a blur of motion and sound. Jamie covered his ears, but Shadow didn't move, not even a blink. When the last car vanished and the world grew quiet again, Jamie dropped back to the ground beside him. "You don't even flinch. It's like you want it to come." Shadow lay his head on his front paws. Jamie leaned in. "What are you waiting for?" There was no answer, only the sound of the wind brushing the grass. Jamie stared at him. "You're not just sitting here for fun. You're holding on to something." He took a small piece of chicken from what was left and placed it beside Shadow. "I'll come again tomorrow," he said. "I mean, if that's okay." Shadow didn't move, but he didn't growl either. Jamie stood slowly, careful not to startle him. He took a few steps back, then turned and began walking down the tracks. After 10 steps, he paused, looked back. Shadow was watching him. Jamie smiled. "I knew it." The next morning, he came again, this time with a blanket. He laid it down nearby and sat cross-legged, pulling out another sandwich. Shadow sat like usual, silent still. Jamie unwrapped a slice of turkey and slid it forward. Shadow took it gently. Jamie chuckled. "Told you I was going to keep showing up." Day after day, he came, sometimes with stories, sometimes with snacks, sometimes just to sit, and Shadow never left. One day, Jamie reached out slowly. Shadow looked at him. Jamie froze. "You don't have to let me," he whispered. He let his fingers rest on the gravel just inches away. Shadow looked at the hand, then at Jamie. And for the first time, he inched forward and pressed his nose to Jamie's palm. Jamie's voice cracked, high. The dog didn't stay long. He pulled back after a moment and laid down again. But it was enough. Jamie wiped his eyes and laughed softly. "You really are something." He leaned back, watching the clouds drift overhead. "You're not alone out here anymore," he said. "You've got me." Shadow didn't look his way, but he didn't need to. Jamie could feel it. Something had shifted. Something had begun. If you feel connected to this story, please like, share, and let know your city or country below. The rain hadn't stopped since yesterday. Jamie sat on the same patch of gravel beside Shadow, his jeans soaked through, his arms wrapped around his knees. The dog didn't seem to mind the cold or the wet. He hadn't moved in nearly an hour. Jamie reached into his backpack and pulled out a slice of ham, placing it gently beside him. Shadow didn't touch it. His eyes were fixed, like always, on the tracks. "You really don't care about food, huh?" Jamie said softly. "You're the only dog I've ever met who turns down ham." Shadow blinked once, then silence again. Jamie shifted a little closer. That's when he saw it just under the edge of matted fur on Shadow's right side. A scar, long, jagged. It ran from his shoulder down to his ribs. Jamie's voice dropped. That's not from a fence or a stick." He reached out, slowly, fingers trembling, and pushed the fur back. Shadow didn't flinch, but his tail gave a faint twitch. "You've been hurt bad," Jamie whispered. That wasn't an accident. He looked closer. Around Shadow's neck was a collar, old leather, cracked from time and weather. The metal tag on it was too rusted to read. "You had someone," Jamie murmured. "Did they leave you?" Shadow's ears didn't move, but his eyes dropped slightly toward the gravel. Jamie swallowed. Or did something happen? He didn't expect an answer, but then the dog exhaled slowly, like something inside had given up long ago. Jamie sat in silence. His chest felt tight. "I had someone too," he whispered, "before my dad left. We used to walk by the river every Sunday. He said we'd do that forever." Shadow blinked. Then one day, he just didn't show up. Jamie didn't speak for a while. Then he leaned forward and reached for the collar again. "I wish I could see your name," he said. "Maybe then I'd know who you were." Shadow turned his head slightly toward Jamie, eyes soft but unreadable. Jamie gave a small smile. "I still like Shadow, though." The train whistle blew in the distance. Shadow's ears shot up. His body went still, his eyes locked on the horizon. Jamie looked toward the tracks. "Same time every day. You know it better than anyone." Shadow stood slowly, limping just a little. He moved closer to the rails, his nose twitching. Jamie followed carefully, staying just behind. "You think someone's coming back on that train?" Shadow didn't look at him. His gaze stayed locked forward, like the train itself was some kind of answer. The whistle grew louder. The rails hummed. Shadow didn't move. Jamie whispered, "You're not afraid of it, are you?" As the train roared past, wind blasting through their clothes and fur, Jamie covered his ears. Shadow didn't even blink when the last car rattled past and silence returned. Shadow sat down again. Jamie walked over and dropped beside him. "You do this every day." A moment passed. Then, slowly, Shadow's head dropped. Jamie took that as a yes. He reached into his bag again, pulling out a granola bar and splitting it in half. "I don't have much today," he said, "but I'm guessing you're not picky." Shadow didn't touch it. Jamie placed both halves between them. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Not my dad. Someone I knew from school. Name was Carter." He barely talked to anyone, just stared at the ground. People called him broken. Jamie paused, but he wasn't broken. He just didn't trust anyone. Shadow sniffed the granola, but didn't eat. Jamie leaned back on his hands. "You know what Carter told me once?" He said, "It's not that I don't feel things. I feel too much. That's why I stay quiet." Shadow turned his head slightly, then back to the tracks. Jamie gave a soft laugh. "Yeah, I thought that was deep too." The clouds above were starting to break. A faint bit of light slipped through. Jamie reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded photo. It was old, wrinkled. A picture of him and his dad fishing by the lake. He showed it to Shadow. This was before everything changed. Shadow sniffed the air. Jamie stared at the photo a moment longer, then tucked it back in. He looked at the collar. "Again, someone put that on you. Someone cared." He touched the rusted tag gently. "You were loved once." Shadow shifted. His paw moved forward slightly, brushing Jamie's shoe. Jamie looked down. "You okay?" Shadow didn't pull back. Jamie smiled. "Progress." The wind picked up again. Leaves scattered down the track. Jamie glanced toward the tree line. "You ever go over there? Into the woods?" No answer. Jamie stood. I bet you've seen a lot out here. Shadow stayed where he was. Jamie backed up a few steps. I'll come again tomorrow, same time. He hesitated. Unless you want to come with me. Shadow looked up, then back at the tracks. Jamie nodded. Didn't think so. He started to walk away. But this time, he didn't look back. He didn't have to, because after a few seconds, he heard footsteps behind him, soft, steady, limping slightly. Jamie froze, turned around. Shadow was following, only for a few steps. Then he stopped. But that was enough. Jamie grinned. Okay, no pressure, just walk me a little. Shadow stood there, still and quiet, but his eyes never left Jamie. Same time tomorrow, Jamie said. He walked on, and this time he didn't feel so alone. Word was spreading. Jamie had barely walked into the corner bakery when the old man behind the counter looked up and muttered, "You're the boy who feeds that dog." Jamie paused. Yeah, why? The baker shook his head. That dog's cursed. Saw something years ago he wasn't supposed to. Been sitting out there ever since. Jamie frowned. Dogs don't get cursed. He don't act right, the man insisted. Dogs forget. They chase sticks. That one just watches, like he's waiting on a ghost. Jamie didn't answer. He took the sandwich he came for, turned, and left. On the way to the tracks, a woman sweeping her porch whispered, "He's back at it, still feeding that mutt." Another said, "Maybe the dog's keeping a secret. Maybe he saw her." Jamie stopped listening. The wind was loud in his ears anyway. Shadow was already there, as always, quiet, unmoving. Eyes fixed ahead. Jamie sat beside him without a word. He unwrapped the sandwich and laid half near the dog's paws. Shadow sniffed it but didn't eat right away. Jamie pulled a book from his bag. "You want a story today?" he asked. "It's about a kid and a lighthouse. Kind of boring, but there's a dog in it too." He started reading aloud. Shadow didn't react, but his breathing slowed like he was listening in his own way. By page 5, Jamie paused. "You know, people say you're cursed. That you saw something too big for a dog." Shadow shifted just slightly. Jamie looked at him. "You did, didn't you?" He closed the book. "What was it?" The dog didn't move. Later that evening, Jamie came back with something new, a blanket. Faded blue, soft. He laid it down near Shadow's usual spot. "Thought maybe this would help," he said. "The ground's cold." Shadow looked at it, then turned his head. Jamie laughed a little. "Too proud, huh? Can't accept help from just anyone." He sat down and pulled a plastic container from his bag. Inside was roast chicken and rice. Shadow finally took a few bites. "You limped a little yesterday," Jamie said. "Does it hurt?" The dog licked his paw, but didn't answer. Jamie leaned closer. "Let me see." He reached out slowly. Shadow's ears flicked. Jamie froze. "I won't touch you if you don't want me." A low growl rumbled from Shadow's chest. Jamie pulled back instantly. Okay, I get it." Shadow stood, limped 2 steps, and sat farther away. Jamie's heart sank. "I didn't mean to scare you." Shadow didn't look back. Jamie stared down at the gravel. "I was just trying to help." For the first time in days, he didn't stay long. He packed up the leftover food and walked off without saying goodbye. The next morning, he came back early. The blanket was still there, untouched, but Shadow was gone. Jamie's heart dropped. "Shadow," he called. Silence. He waited for an hour. Nothing. Another hour passed. Still nothing. Jamie sat on the blanket, chewing a cold sandwich, alone. But as the sun began to rise, a shape appeared down the track, limping, steady, coming closer. It was Shadow. Jamie stood up fast. "Where did you go?" The dog didn't answer, just walked past and sat in his usual spot. Jamie let out a breath. "I thought you left." He reached into his backpack again and pulled out a fresh bowl of water. "You need to drink something. You're limping worse." Shadow sniffed the bowl, then drank. Jamie sat beside him again, this time closer than before. "I'm not gonna push anymore. You'll let me in when you're ready." Shadow's ears twitched, but he didn't move away. Jamie nodded to himself. "You came back. That's what matters." Over the next few days, Jamie kept returning. He brought short stories, snacks, even played quiet music on his phone. Sometimes, Shadow would sit closer. Other times, he'd back away. But he always came back. The town kept talking. Should call animal control. Someone muttered at the gas station. Bet that Mutt knows where the girl is buried. Another whispered. Jamie didn't answer any of them. He only talked to Shadow. One afternoon, Jamie read a chapter from his favorite book and then lowered his voice. "They say you saw something. I believe them now. I think. That's why you stay here. You're guarding it." Shadow didn't move, but he didn't blink either. Jamie set the book down. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore." At that evening, Jamie stayed later than usual. The wind had picked up, and the air felt sharp. He opened a second sandwich and shared it without asking. "I don't care what they say," he told Shadow. "You're not cursed. You're loyal. There's a difference." Shadow took the food gently from his hand. Jamie looked at the scar on the dog's side again. It seemed deeper in the fading light. "You saw something," Jamie repeated. "Something bad." Shadow stared at the tracks. Then, slowly, he let out a low sigh and lay down on the blanket for the first time. Jamie froze. "You like it?" The dog didn't react, but he didn't get up either. Jamie smiled. "Took you long enough." The train came minutes later. Shadow didn't budge. Jamie whispered, "Who are you still waiting for?" The wind howled, carrying the sound of metal far into the night. The answer never came, but Shadow, he stayed. Jamie couldn't shake it. The way Shadow stared at the tracks, the way he growled when anyone got too close, the way he slept with one eye open, like he was guarding something no one else could see. There had to be a reason, so that morning, Jamie brought more than food. He carried a small shovel, the kind people used for planting flowers. He stuffed it in his backpack and headed for the tracks early. While the world was still quiet, Shadow was already there, curled beside the blanket. He raised his head when Jamie approached, but didn't move. Jamie sat beside him and whispered, "Don't get mad. I'm not doing anything bad. I just want to understand." He waited a few minutes, pretending to eat a sandwich. Then he stood up and walked along the edge of the tracks, scanning the ground. Nothing looked different, just dirt, roots, gravel. But something tugged at him. A patch of earth, not far from the bend. It looked ... off, a little too smooth, like it had been disturbed long ago. Jamie knelt beside it. "I'm not trying to mess things up," he whispered. Shadow didn't bark, didn't growl. He just watched. Jamie dug slowly. The shovel barely made a sound as he worked through the dry soil. Then it hit something hard. His breath caught. He brushed the dirt away with his hands. It was a box, small, wooden. The edges were rotted, corners eaten by time. But it was real, and sealed tight. Jamie looked back. Shadow, what is this? The dog didn't move, just stared. His eyes didn't blink. Jamie's hands trembled as he pulled the box out and sat back. Do I open it? Silence. I guess that means yes. He pried at the edge with the tip of the shovel. The lid cracked. Dust spilled out. Inside, wrapped in a torn cloth, was something soft. Jamie unwrapped it. A baby shoe, tiny worn, pink ribbon, still threaded through the hole. Jamie stared at it, frozen, and beneath the shoe, a locket. He picked it up. The metal was rusted, but the chain was still whole. He opened it. Inside was a picture, faded and almost unreadable. A woman, smiling, holding a baby. Jamie couldn't speak. His throat felt tight. His fingers shook. He looked up at Shadow. You knew this was here. Shadow stood now, still silent, but his tail was stiff. His eyes locked on the box. Jamie whispered, Is this what you've been guarding? Shadow let out the softest whine. Jamie turned the locket over. There were initials scratched into the back. FM. He stood and took a step back. Why would someone bury this? Shadow walked forward and sat beside the hole. Jamie stared. You were here when it happened. His voice cracked. You saw it, didn't you? Shadow didn't respond, but he didn't look away. Jamie crouched down and gently put the box back into the earth. He couldn't explain why, but it felt wrong to keep it out. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to take it from you. He filled the hole back in, smoothing the dirt the way he'd found it. Then he sat down beside Shadow, holding the locket in his hand. I don't know what this means, but I think you do. Shadow lay down, nose resting near Jamie's shoe. The boy looked up at the sky. I think someone left you here to remember. He closed the locket and slipped it into his pocket. And now, maybe it's my turn to remember too. He looked at Shadow. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I understand. Shadow closed his eyes. Jamie stayed there until the train passed. And when it did, Shadow didn't lift his head. He just stayed beside the boy. Quiet Jamie didn't sleep that night. The baby shoe, the buried box, the locket with the faded picture here, couldn't get any of it out of his head. He lay on his bed, the locket in his hand, flipping it open and closed. The woman's face was still faintly visible. Her eyes, they looked sad, even in the old photo. Beside her, a tiny toddler sat. On her lap, chubby hands reaching toward the camera. Jamie finally stood and tiptoed into the kitchen. His mum was drinking tea at the table, her eyes tired. She looked up. You're awake. Jamie sat across from her and placed the locket gently on the table. Her eyes dropped to it. Where did you get that? I found it near the tracks. He said quietly, buried. There was a box and a baby shoe. She picked up the locket, opened it, and froze. Her hand began to shake. That's Maria, she whispered. Jamie sat up straight. You know her. His mum didn't answer right away. She stared at the photo like it had dragged her back in time. She was a sweet girl, lived on the other side of town. I was a teenager. When she vanished, her and her little girl, they just disappeared. Jamie's heart pounded. What happened to them? No one knows, she said softly. One day she went out to the store, and she never came home. What about the child? She hesitated. They never found her. People searched for weeks. There were posters, news stories, everything. Jamie's hands clenched. And the dog? What dog? He took a deep breath. The German Shepherd, Shadow. He's been sitting at the tracks for years, always staring in the same direction. Her face changed. You think it's connected? Jamie nodded. I don't think he ever stopped waiting. She looked at the locket again, her voice barely a whisper. That dog used to follow Maria. Everywhere. Jamie blinked. You've seen him before, I think. Yes. Back then, he was younger, but it might be the same one. Jamie couldn't breathe for a second. His thoughts raced. I think he saw something, Jamie said. Something bad. His mum set the locket down carefully. Jamie, you can't go poking around in old wounds. That family went through hell. But what if this helps? Her eyes filled with worry. You're just a kid. What can you do? Jamie looked down. Maybe I'm the only one who can listen. His mum didn't speak. She just reached out and gently touched his hand. The next day, Jamie returned to the tracks with the locket in his pocket. Shadow was there, like always. Jamie sat beside him. I showed it to my mum, he whispered. She knew her. Shadow. Didn't look at him, but his ears perked. She said your name might be from back then. That you belonged to her. Jamie took the locket out, held it up to the light. This is your family, isn't it? Shadow stared forward. Jamie's voice cracked. You saw something. You saw what happened to her. He swallowed hard. And you've been guarding it ever since. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Shadow lowered his head and let out a long, low whine. Jamie nodded. I'll help you. Shadow lifted his eyes and met Jamie's gaze. It was the first time Jamie felt like they were no longer strangers. They were in this together now, and whatever truth had been buried with that box, they were going to dig it up. Jamie had just finished placing the roast chicken on the usual spot when he noticed the man. He was stumbling near the far end of the tracks, bottle in hand, yelling something Jamie couldn't make out. Shadow stiffened immediately. His body low, tense, Jamie narrowed his eyes. Stay here, boy, he whispered. It's just some drunk. Ignore him. But Shadow didn't ignore him. His ears were up, eyes locked, tail stiff. The man walked closer, dragging one foot, glass, swinging loosely from his fingers. Jamie stood, heart thudding. Sir, maybe you should head home. The man blinked at him. What's that mutt still doing here? Jamie stepped between him and Shadow. He's not hurting anyone. The man pointed the bottle at the dog. That's the freak dog, ain't it? My cousin said it just stares like a ghost. Maybe it needs a lesson. Jamie's voice rose. He's not a freak. Just go. But the man didn't go. Instead, he threw the bottle. It shattered just beside Shadow. Glass scattering across the gravel. Everything happened in a second. Shadow lunged. A growl exploded from his chest. Teeth bared the man. Shouted. Stumbling back, Jamie dove in front, arms out. Shadow, stop. Shadow skidded to a halt, inches from the man, snarling, chest heaving. Jamie grabbed the dog's collar and held tight. It's okay, I've got you, it's okay. The man tripped backward, nearly falling. That thing's crazy, he yelled, turning and running. Jamie didn't move. He kept holding Shadow, feeling his whole body tremble beneath his grip. You're okay now, Jamie whispered. You're safe. Shadow finally collapsed to the ground, panting hard. Jamie knelt beside him. You weren't going to hurt him, were you? Shadow didn't answer, but the fire in his eyes had faded. Jamie gently stroked his back. You were protecting something. He looked into those deep, broken eyes, or someone. Shadow didn't pull away. He leaned into Jamie's touch. For the first time, Jamie's hand trembled as he whispered, "You loved her, didn't you?" Maria Shadow's tail thumped once, soft against the ground. Jamie looked away, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry he scared you. People don't understand." He took a breath. "But I do now. You're not just waiting. You're guarding her." Memory. Shadow let out a soft whine and pressed closer. His fur brushed Jamie's side. Jamie didn't move. He stayed there, silent, until the train came. And for once, Shadow didn't look at the tracks. He looked at Jamie, and that said more than words ever could. Shadow didn't return to the tracks the next morning. Jamie waited. He sat on the blanket with a full water bowl, a sandwich, and the rusted locket in his hand. 2 hours passed. Nothing. "Where are you, boy?" Jamie whispered, glancing down. Both sides of the tracks. Then he saw it, just a flicker of tan fur slipping into the trees behind the fence. Jamie stood fast. Shadow, no answer, but the tail disappeared through the undergrowth. Jamie climbed over the fence and followed. Branches scraped his arms. Leaves crunched under his shoes. He pushed through the brush, eyes scanning. Shadow. A low bark answered. Jamie picked up speed. He found the dog standing still between 2 old trees. Shadow looked at him, then turned, and started walking again, slower this time, like he wanted Jamie to follow. The path grew tighter. The woods were quiet, almost too quiet. Jamie stepped carefully, ducking under a low branch. "Where are we going?" Shadow didn't answer, just kept walking. He limped slightly, but his pace never slowed. After 10 minutes, the trees opened just enough to reveal a patch of ground, sunken, uneven, covered in tangled vines and soft moss. Shadow stopped. Then he laid down. Right there, Jamie looked around. Why here? Shadow didn't move. He rested his chin on the ground, eyes half closed, tail still. Jamie took a hesitant step forward. The air felt different. He knelt beside the dog and pressed his hand to the ground, cold to cold. His voice cracked. "Is this where she is?" Shadow didn't react. Jamie's fingers tightened around the locket in his pocket. "Maria," he whispered. Shadow let out the softest whine. Jamie looked around again. No markers, no stones, no names, just dirt. "A grave with no name," he said under his breath. His chest tightened. "How long have you been lying here?" Shadow closed his eyes. Jamie felt like crying. "You never left her, did you?" He reached out, gently resting a hand on Shadow's back. "All this time, this is what you were guarding." The dog didn't flinch. Jamie sat beside him, knees pulled to his chest. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, he whispered, "I think people forgot her." Shadow's ears twitched. "But you didn't." Jamie reached into his bag and pulled out the photo from the locket. It was faded and worn, but the figures were still there. He placed it gently on the dirt. She should have something here, even if it's just this. The woods stayed still. Shadow stayed even stiller. Jamie wiped at his eyes. "You've been grieving alone. You don't have to anymore." He pulled out a pen and wrote her name, on the back of the photo. Then he whispered, "You mattered." And for the first time since the tracks, Shadow leaned his head against Jamie's knee. He didn't move. He just stayed there, holding the memory, holding her. Jamie couldn't stop thinking about the grave, the way Shadow had curled beside it, the way the ground had felt cold even in the sun. The photo now buried beneath the vines. Maria, That name haunted him. He needed answers, back at home. He sat across from his mum at the table. Did Maria know anyone who wanted to hurt her? His mum looked up slowly. Jamie, why are you asking that? Please, just tell me. She sighed. There were rumors. Before she disappeared, she said someone was following her. She made noise about it, went to the police. Jamie leaned in, and they brushed it off, said she was emotional, said there was no proof. Do you know who she accused? His mum shook her head. She never said names. But some people think it was someone with money, someone who could make things disappear. Jamie's chest tightened, and no one believed her. They called her unstable, said she made it up. Double quotes. Jamie stood. I need to go to the library. His mum blinked now. There's someone I need to talk to. He packed his bag and walked. Fast. The local library was nearly empty. Just a couple of readers in the corners and a sleepy man behind the desk. Jamie scanned the far wall until he saw her June Ellis. She sat behind stacks of newspapers, hunched over a notebook, glasses slipping. Down her nose, Jamie approached slowly. Excuse me, are you June? She looked up. Depends who's asking. I'm Jamie. I think you wrote about Maria, the woman who disappeared. Her eyes sharpened. You're too young to know. About that. I found something, Jamie said. Something she left behind. And I think I found her dog. June's face went still. Her dog, Jamie nodded. A German shepherd. He's been living by the tracks, watching, waiting. She whispered. Shadow. Jamie's breath caught. That's his name. She nodded slowly. He was loyal. Never left her side. When she vanished, so did he. Some folks said he ran off. Others thought he died too. Jamie's voice shook. He's alive. He's still there. And he led me to something. June leaned forward. What did he lead you to? Jamie hesitated. A grave. In the woods. There's no name, but... She took a deep breath. I tried to publish what Maria told me, but no one would print it. She said she had evidence. She said someone close to law enforcement hurt her child. Jamie stared. Her daughter, June, nodded. She was scared, but she was also determined. Said she'd never let him win. Jamie clenched his fists, and they just ignored her. They called her unstable, emotional, paranoid, but she wasn't. No, she was right. Jamie looked down. The box I found. It had her baby's shoe in it. June closed her eyes for a second. That poor girl, and no justice. Jamie whispered, but Shadow never gave up. He's still trying to tell someone. June leaned back. Maybe it's time someone listened. Jamie stood. Will you help me? She looked him straight in the eyes. Yes, I will. And just like that, the truth began to stir. The dream hit Jamie like a lightning strike. A girl's scream sharp, desperate echoing through trees he didn't recognize. Her voice cracked through the dark. Help me. He jolted awake, soaked in sweat. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. It had felt real. Too real. The clock read 5:12 a.m. Rain tapped at the window. Thunder rolled in the distance. He sat up, breathing heavy, then reached over and grabbed the rusted locket from his nightstand. Maria, he whispered. By the time he reached the tracks, the storm had arrived. The sky was dark. Rain poured in sheets. Shadow was already there. But something was wrong. He wasn't sitting. He wasn't calm. He was pacing, barking at nothing. Shadow, Jamie called out, pulling his hood tighter. The dog turned sharply, eyes wild, body tense. Then he bolted. Shadow. Jamie shouted, "Wait." But the shepherd didn't wait. He took off down the side path that led to the woods. Jamie ran after him, slipping in the mud, nearly falling. The wind howled in his ears. Shadow's paws splashed through puddles. He barked again, louder this time, urgent. "Where are you going?" Jamie shouted. He chased him deeper into the trees, branches whipping his face, water soaking his clothes, and then Shadow stopped, right at the edge of the sunken patch, the same place where he had laid before. Jamie caught up. Panting, heart racing, Shadow growled, low, constant. Then he began to dig. His paws tore at the dirt, flinging it back in wet clumps. He snarled as if the earth itself was fighting him. "Shadow, what are you doing?" Jamie asked, but the dog didn't. "Stop, Dot." Jamie dropped to his knees beside him and reached in. Something was there, not just dirt wood. Again, Jamie's fingers scraped it clear. It wasn't like the first box. This one was larger, flatter, buried deeper. Together, boy and dog uncovered it. A wooden board, rotted around the edges. Jamie braced himself and pulled underneath. A cloth, torn, molded. He reached in and froze bones, tiny, fragile, curled like they had never had a chance to grow. Jamie's breath caught. No. Shadow let out a low whimper and backed away, his body trembling. Jamie covered his mouth, fighting the tears that blurred his vision. "It's her," he whispered. "It's the baby." Thunder boomed overhead. Jamie stared at the small, broken remains. She was buried here, and no one ever came to find her. Shadow sat down, lowering his head to the dirt. Jamie didn't speak for a long time. Then he whispered, "You brought me here because you couldn't carry it anymore, didn't you?" The dog lifted his eyes. They were full of something Jamie couldn't name. "People need to know," Jamie said. "She needs a name. She needs the truth." Shadow wind again, then rested his head on Jamie's leg. And for the first time since Maria disappeared, the truth was no longer buried. Jamie didn't move for a long time. He sat in the mud, rain still falling. Shadow pressed close against him. His hands were numb, but his heart was burning. Beneath the broken board lay something sacred, something no one had dared to look for. He wiped his face, pulled his phone from his soaked pocket, and called the only number he could think of, 911. "What's your emergency?" There's something buried in the woods," Jamie said. "It's not an animal." The voice on the line changed. "Are you hurt?" "No, but someone was. A long time ago. Where are you?" Jamie gave directions with shaking breath. "Please, hurry." He hung up and turned to Shadow. "They're coming, boy." The dog didn't move. He stood like a statue, staring at the patch of dirt as if still guarding it. 30 minutes later, red and blue lights flickered through the trees. 2 officers stepped out first. One of them frowned. "Who called this in?" "I did," Jamie said, stepping forward. The man looked him over. "You're just a kid," Jamie pointed at the disturbed ground. "There's something under there. Bones. Small ones." The other officer crouched near the hole. He peeled back the cloth, then stopped. His eyes went wide. "We're going to need backup." Within an hour, the woods were crawling with people, police, forensics, men with cameras and gloves. Yellow tape was stretched between the trees. Jamie stood back, arms crossed tight, soaked to the skin. An officer approached. "You found this alone?" Jamie shook his head. Not alone. My friend led me here. The officer followed Jamie's gaze to Shadow, who was sitting quietly in the mud, eyes locked on the grave. The officer's voice softened. That your dog? Jamie shook his head again. He's not mine. He's hers. Hers. Maria's. The woman who went missing years ago. That's her baby down there. I know it. The officer looked stunned. How do you know? Jamie pulled the locket from his pocket. This was buried with a baby shoe near the tracks. The photo inside it's her. And this dog. He's been sitting at the tracks ever since. Another officer called out, We've got confirmed remains. Small, likely a child. Jamie's knees nearly gave out. Shadow didn't move. A detective came over next. We need a statement. From the beginning, Jamie nodded. I'll tell you everything, but you have to believe me. The dog, he's been trying to tell someone for years. The detective gave him a strange look, but motioned to a notepad. Start talking. Jamie told them everything. About the dog on the tracks, the buried box, the photos, the grave, the scream in the dream. He kept glancing at Shadow, who hadn't left the spot. When he was done, no one laughed. No one questioned his truth. They simply got to work. Hours passed. Finally, a coroner stood and whispered something to the lead officer. The man walked back to Jamie. His voice was quiet. You were right. The bones, they're human, female, very small, likely around 2 or 3 years old, and very old. Jamie's voice cracked. So it's really her. We can't say yet, but it looks like it. Jamie turned to Shadow, who still hadn't moved. They were right here all along, he whispered. All this time. Shadow stood slowly, eyes heavy, tail still. Jamie walked to him and knelt down. You did it, boy. You held on. You kept her safe. The shepherd pressed his head into Jamie's chest. Tears spilled down Jamie's cheeks. One officer nearby whispered, That dog, he stayed for her. Jamie nodded. He never left, not once. And that day, for the first time in over a decade, the truth came up from the roots, and the world finally listened to the dog, who never stopped waiting. Jamie sat outside the station, hands clenched in his lap, Shadow lying beside him. Inside, officers were running DNA tests. The remains had been sent to the lab. The items from the grave were catalogued. But no one was talking to him. He looked down at Shadow. You knew where she was. You waited. But there's still something else, isn't there? Shadow blinked slowly. His ears twitched. Jamie sighed. You're not done. As if answering, Shadow stood up and began to walk. Slowly, like he was leading again. Jamie followed. They crossed town, past old houses and forgotten sheds. The rain from the day before had left puddles on the broken roads. Shadow didn't stop, didn't look back. Jamie stayed close. Where are we going? They reached the edge of the woods, deeper than Jamie had ever gone. Then Shadow turned leftward, a place that looked more like memory than real life. A collapsed fence, overgrown grass, and beyond it, an old cabin, nearly swallowed by trees. Shadow walked straight to the door. Jamie hesitated. You've been here before. The dog nudged the door open with his head. It creaked, but didn't resist. Inside, it smelled of rot and dust. Jamie stepped in. Heart thudding, the cabin was one room. Empty furniture, a cracked mirror, torn curtains. Shadow walked to the back corner and stopped. He sniffed the floor, then pawed at it gently. Jamie knelt down. There were clothes, dirty, torn, faded with time, and photos shoved behind a shelf. Jamie picked one up, a picture of Maria holding her baby, standing in front of the tracks. He stared. This is proof. Then his eyes caught something on the wall. He stood slowly, walked toward it. Scratched into the wood were 4 letters, WHEN, and beneath it a name. Jamie's breath caught. No way, he whispered. Clayton Thomas. That name. Everyone in town knew it. The sheriff's brother. Jamie took a step back. He did this. Shadow growled, low. Jamie looked at him. He brought her here. He hurt her, and they covered it up. Shadow stared at the wall. Jamie pulled out his phone and snapped photos of the name. The photos, the clothes. He ran back to town, straight to June. She opened the door in a robe. Jamie, what's wrong? Come with me, he said, gasping. Now, she didn't ask questions, just grabbed her coat and followed. Back at the cabin, she stared at the scratched name. Clayton, she whispered. They said he left town years ago. Jamie nodded. Or they sent him away to hide what he did. June turned to him. If this is real, everything changes. It is, Jamie said. Shadow brought me here. June took the photos. I'm sending these to the state. Someone higher than the sheriff. Jamie looked down. He's going to fight this. June shook her head. Not this time. Not with this kind of proof. That night, news spread like wildfire. By morning, the sheriff's office was full of investigators. Clayton's name hit the news, and by sunset he was in handcuffs. Shadow stood on the hill. Watching it all unfold, Jamie walked over and placed a hand on his fur. You did it, boy. Shadow didn't move. He just stared at the flashing lights. Justice was finally coming. By morning, the story was everywhere. A child's grave, a forgotten case, a name scratched into a wall, and a boy, and a dog. Some people called Jamie a hero. Others called him trouble. Shadow sat beside Jamie on the library steps as the first reporter showed up. Microphone in hand, eyes too sharp. Is it true the dog found the body? Jamie looked down. He didn't just find it, he guarded it. For years. The camera crew started filming. Jamie's mom rushed over, pulling him aside. You don't have to talk to them. But Jamie stepped forward. I want to. That evening, his face was on the local news. The dog, too, sitting beside the grave. The next day, a neighbor stopped Jamie in front of the grocery store. You should have stayed quiet, kid. Jamie froze. Why? You're stirring up old ghosts. People got on with their lives. Now you're digging up pain for no reason. Jamie stared back. No reason, he pointed toward the tracks. That girl was buried like trash. He sat there every day waiting for someone to care. And no one did. The man looked away. Not your business. It is now. Jamie kept walking. Shadow followed, his head low. More people whispered. At school, at the diner. Some offered kind words. Others just stared. A woman left flowers by the tracks. A man yelled at Shadow to leave town. The mayor called a meeting. Jamie wasn't invited, but he stood outside the building, waiting. June came out first, her face tight. They want to move on, she said. Pretend it's over. It's not over, Jamie said. Not until the whole town knows the truth. Shadow stood beside him, still and proud. Jamie reached down and rubbed his ear. They can talk all they want. We're not going anywhere. That night, someone threw eggs at Jamie's front door. His mum cleaned them off in silence. Jamie helped her. Jaw clenched. They're scared. She looked at him. Scared of what? The truth, he said. That it happened, and that everyone ignored it. The next morning, Shadow was gone. Jamie panicked. He ran to the tracks. Checked the woods, finally, near the grave he found him. Shadow was lying there. Like always, like he'd never left. Jamie knelt beside him. You're not just guarding her anymore, are you? Shadow didn't move. You're guarding the truth. Jamie pulled out a marker on a piece of wood. He wrote 4 words. She was never forgotten. He placed it at the head of the grave. People would tear it down, but he'd write it again, because Shadow hadn't forgotten, and Jamie never would. The knock came just after sunset. Jamie opened the door and found June standing on the porch, a small cassette tape clutched tightly in her hand. Her face looked older than usual, tired, nervous but clear-eyed. I should have done this years ago, she said, but I was scared. Jamie stepped aside. What is it? June walked in slowly and set the tape on the table. It's Maria's voice. A week before she disappeared, she came to me. She made me promise not to play it unless something happened. Jamie stared at the tape. Why didn't you show anyone? They would have laughed. They would have called her crazy like they always did. Her voice cracked, but she wasn't. Jamie picked up the tape with shaky fingers. What's on it? June sat down. Her truth. What she saw. Who hurt her. Jamie whispered Clayton. June nodded. She names him. She says he followed her, that he threatened to take her daughter. Jamie sat down, heart racing. We have to play it. June met his eyes. Then you'll need a room that can't ignore it. The next morning, Jamie marched into town hall with the tape in his pocket and Shadow by his side. He didn't ask for permission. He walked straight to the front of the chamber where the mayor sat talking to reporters. I have something to say, Jamie called out. Voices turned. Phones came up. The mayor frowned. Jamie, this isn't the time. It's the only time, Jamie said. You wanted the town to forget, but you never even listened to her. Someone muttered in the crowd, he's just a kid. Jamie stepped forward. And that's just a dog, right? He pointed to Shadow, who stood tall beside him. But we're the ones who found her. We're the ones who stayed. The room went quiet. Jamie pulled out the cassette. This is Maria's voice. She gave it to June. It names the man who hurt her and buried the truth. If you care at all, listen. A man from the local paper stood. Let the boy play it. The mayor hesitated, then sighed. Fine. Jamie walked over and placed the tape into the old player June had brought. His hands shook. He pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then a voice, soft, trembling. This is Maria Evans. If you're hearing this. Something happened to me. A hush fell over the room. I went to the police. I told them about Clayton. He said if I didn't stay quiet, he'd hurt my baby. He followed me. He knew where I went, who I saw. A few gasps echoed from the back. Rose, I begged for help, but they laughed, said I was just tired, just a single mum making things up. But my dog, my Shadow, he knows. He saw it all. He followed him. He protected us. Jamie looked down at Shadow. The dog stood perfectly. Still, eyes forward, ears sharp. I'm scared. Maria's voice cracked. I don't know who to trust, but I'll never stop fighting for her. I'll never stop telling the truth. Then came silence. The tape clicked off. No one spoke. Jamie stepped back. She asked you to believe her, and you didn't. The mayor looked pale. A woman in the second row wiped her eyes. We failed her. June stood beside Jamie. It's not too late to make it right. An older man near the door spoke quietly. The boy and the dog found what none of us would face. Shadow let out a low whine. Jamie knelt beside him, resting a hand on his neck. She never stopped trying, Jamie said, and neither did he. That night, people lit candles near the tracks. Others brought flowers to the grave, but no one could erase what was finally said out loud. The girl had spoken, and this time the town listened. Shadow stopped eating 3 days after the town meeting. Jamie brought him roast chicken, the kind he used to love. Shadow sniffed it, then turned his head away. Jamie sat beside him, the same way he always did, trying not to panic. Come on, boy, you need to eat. Just a little. But Shadow didn't move. He lay curled beside the grave body, still, eyes dull. The wooden sign Jamie had placed "She was never forgotten" stood quietly behind them. Leaning slightly from the wind, Jamie tried again the next morning. Boiled eggs, leftover turkey, even cheese. Shadow wouldn't touch any of it. Jamie knelt beside him. Please. You can't stop now. We did it. Everyone knows the truth now. You can rest, but not like this. Shadow blinked, barely. Jamie reached forward and touched his fur. You waited all those years. Don't go now. Not like this. But something had changed. The fire in Shadow's eyes had dimmed. The strength in his shoulders was gone. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was fading. By day 4, Jamie called the vet. Dr. Fields came in quiet, carrying her bag. She crouched beside Shadow, brushing back his fur gently. He's very old, she said softly. Older than we thought. Jamie's voice shook, but he was okay before. He was walking, eating, barking. The vet checked his heartbeat, his breath. She gave a long, heavy sigh. He's shutting down. His body's been holding on for something for a long time. And now that he's done it, Jamie stared. He waited too long. Dr. Fields nodded. Sometimes, when animals carry deep grief or guilt, they stay alive for someone else. But when their mission ends, so does the will to keep going. Jamie sat on the ground, tears forming fast. But he didn't get to rest yet. He didn't get to be happy. Shadow stirred, just a little. Enough to nudge his nose against Jamie's knee. Jamie broke. He dropped beside him, hands shaking as they held the dog's worn body. You didn't need to suffer this much. You should have had a home. You should have had peace. Dr. Fields knelt beside him. You gave him what he needed. Jamie, you listened. You found her. You brought her story back to life. Jamie whispered, but it wasn't enough. Shadow let out a slow, soft breath. Jamie bent closer. I'm here, boy. I'm not leaving you. Shadow's tail moved just once. Jamie leaned his forehead to Shadow's. You just wanted the truth. That's all you ever wanted. For a few more minutes, Jamie just sat there, holding on, while Shadow's breathing grew shallow. Then, like a whisper carried by the wind, it stopped, and Shadow was still. Jamie didn't move, didn't speak. He just stayed there in the mud and the silence, holding the bravest dog the town had ever forgotten, and finally, at the end, remembered. Jamie worked with his hands all day. He didn't talk, he didn't cry, not yet. He just carved. The piece of wood had once been part of an old fence behind his house. He sanded it smooth, then etched the words one by one. His fingers ached, but he didn't stop. By the time the sun dipped low, it was done. She was never forgotten. Jamie carried the marker back to the woods, one footstep at a time. When he reached the grave, he knelt beside it, pressing the wood deep into the dirt. Beside it lay Shadow. Jamie had wrapped him gently in a blanket, the same one they'd shared by the tracks. "Hope you don't mind sharing the spot," Jamie whispered. "You never left her. Now you never will." The town didn't speak much the next day, but people came, quietly, slowly. Some followed the trail to the woods. Some just stood at the edge. June was the first to kneel. She laid a single white rose by the grave. "He did what none of us had the courage to do," she said. He waited. Then came others. Old men, young couples, even the mayor. Nobody made speeches. Nobody brought cameras. They brought silence and flowers and guilt. Jamie stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. A girl he didn't know placed a teddy bear on the grave. An old man whispered, "I walked past him every day, and I never asked why he sat there." Jamie finally spoke. He didn't need your pity. He needed your ears. More people came the next day and the next. Someone left a candle. Someone else brought a wooden cross. But what came last was a statue. It wasn't fancy, just metal, shaped carefully by a local artist. A German shepherd, sitting tall, ears up, eyes forward, watching the tracks. They placed it right in front of the grave, facing the direction Shadow always faced. When Jamie saw it, he smiled. "I think he'd like that," he whispered. His mom stood behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "He made us remember." Jamie nodded. "And now no one can forget." They had once called the dog cursed. Now they called him a guardian, and in the center of it all, he watched forever. It had been 5 days since the statue was placed by the grave. 5 days since Jamie last walked the tracks. But that morning, before the sun had even fully risen, he woke to a sound he hadn't heard in a while. The train whistled soft, distant, familiar. He sat up in bed, heart racing for no reason he could explain. He glanced at the time. Las 6:42. Alter M. Jamie got dressed quickly, slipped on his shoes, and stepped outside. The air was cool, quiet. He didn't tell his mum where he was going. He just walked. Each step felt slower than the last, like the ground itself didn't want to let go of something. When he reached the tracks, the sky was just starting to turn gold, and that's when he saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow against the morning light. Then it moved. Jamie blinked. There, right at the edge of the gravel, sat a German shepherd, still, calm, tail curled around his feet, watching the tracks. Just like always, Jamie stepped forward, holding his breath. "Shadow," he whispered. The dog turned its head slightly and wagged its tail. Jamie's eyes filled with tears. He didn't move. He didn't want to ruin it. "I miss you, boy," he said softly. "I miss you so much." The train whistle blew again, louder now. And just like that, he was gone. Jamie looked around. The tracks were empty, but somehow his heart felt full. He wiped his face and sat down on the same old blanket he used to bring. He looked toward the woods, where the statue stood beside the grave, and smiled. "You did it, boy," he whispered. "You never left her side. Not even." Now, behind him, the train passed, and for the first time since it all began, Jamie didn't feel alone. Jamie walked home with his hands in his pockets, the morning sun just rising behind him. The image of Shadow by the tracks still lingered. In his mind, that calm stare, that final tail wag, he knew what it was. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't his imagination, it was goodbye. When he stepped inside, the house was quiet. His mum was still asleep. The world hadn't caught up yet. Jamie walked at his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and pulled the rusted locket from his drawer. He held it gently, like it might break. He flipped it open one more time. Maria, the baby, that smile full of hope. He stared at it for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the window, the same window where the light hit just right in the morning. He placed the locket on the sill and whispered, "You waited for her, didn't you?" His voice cracked. "You never gave up, even when everyone else did." He closed his eyes. "She's at peace now, Shadow. Because of you." Outside, the tracks stretched on, empty, quiet, but the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt full. Jamie sat by the window, knees pulled up to his chest. "I'll never forget you," he whispered, "and I'll make sure no one else does either." The breeze moved the curtain. He could have sworn he heard a tail thump once, and then nothing, just peace, and the story of a dog who waited until the end and beyond. Did this story touch your heart? Give it a thumbs up, share it around, and drop your location in the comments.